Okay, guys, so today we're going to do the hip bone. It's a large, flat, curved bone that forms the sides and front of the pelvis. It's also called as os coxae, coxal bone, or innominate bone. Os means bone and coxa means hip or hip joint, so it's the bone of the hip joint. It's an irregular type of bone. There are three bones that are forming the hip bone: the ilium, pubis, and ischium. The ilium forms most of the hip bone, and it forms two-fifths of the acetabulum of the hip bone. Further on, from which one-fifth is formed by the pubis and two-fifths is formed by the ischium. That's your three bones of the hip bone. So superiorly we have the ilium, anterior inferiorly we have the uh, pubis, and then posterior inferiorly we have the ischium. The pubis has a body and two ramises. Ramus in Latin means branch, and the ischium has a little body and one ramus, while the ilium has a wing or ala. That's the upper plate that is projected upwards, and the body, which is the lower part. Now, acetabulum in Latin means a vinegar cup. So, this is how a vinegar cup used to look like in the olden ages, due to which this part of the hip bone is called the acetabulum. As I told you, two-fifths of it is made by the ilium. Then one-fifth is made by the pubis and two-fifths is made by the ischium. Now, there's a triradiate cartilage in this acetabulum that is made from the development of these three bones when their cartilage is joining together during ossification. Now, we have this foramen. It's a really big foramen called the obturator foramen. We have an obturator membrane present in this obturator foramen, and the obturator foramen basically separates the pubis and ischium. And also, we can say that it joins the pubis and ischium at the ramises. Now, hip joint. The hip bone has a very big articulation with the femoral head in its acetabulum. When we studied the femoral head, we said that the entire head is enclosed in cartilage except the fovea capitis. And that is because the ligament of head of femur, the ligamentum teres, was attaching to the fovea capitis in the femoral head, sorry. So the femoral head articulates with the acetabulum at the hip joint, and that is that area in which we have all the anastomosing taking place and a lot of ligaments here due to the hip joint complex being here. Moving on, we have a joint called the pubic symphysis. Now, the pubic symphysis is formed by the two pubic bones coming together, and their symphysial surfaces join one another to form the pubic symphysis joint. So, this is our hip bone, and this is the symphysial surface. This is the pubis. This is the anterior surface. This is the symphysial surface. And this area is the pelvic cavity. So this is the pelvic surface. So anterior surface, symphysial surface, and pelvic surface. That's your pubic symphysis joint. Moving on to the sacroiliac joint, when we talk about the hip bone, we can see that there's a rough area here. This rough area is called the sacropelvic surface. The smooth area is the iliac fossa, where the iliacus muscle joint attaches, and this other area that is at the back of this bone, at the back side, or I would say outer lateral side, is the gluteal surface. So this is the gluteal surface. This is the iliacus surface or iliac fossa, and this is the sacropelvic surface. Now, the sacropelvic surface has a this is the iliac tuberosity on the sacropelvic surface, and this is the auricular surface. The auricular surface is pretty rough compared to the upper iliac tuberosity, and this auricular surface directly articulates with the sacrum behind. So the two bones are joined by the symphysial surface of the pubis bone anteriorly, and the sacrum joins the two iliums posteriorly by making the sacroiliac joint. Inflammation of this joint in heavy weighted women after the age of 45 due to long hours of sitting can cause sacroiliitis here. Now we have the side determination. So if we pick the bone up, how do we know which side it belongs to? Basically, the acetabulum articulates with the femur at the lateral side, right? So first of all, the acetabulum should be placed laterally. Then the flat ilium, the ala or wing part of the ilium, is expanded to form the upper part of the bone. So you can't really place the bone like this. You're supposed to put it in the upper part. And then the pubis bone lies superiorly and anteriorly, while the ischium lies um, posteriorly and inferiorly. Okay, so that's how you know that this bone belongs to the left side of the body. In whichever side of the body the bone belongs to, try to hold that bone in that hand so as to not get confused while explaining the bone in the viva. So the pubic symphysis and anterior superior spine lie in the same coronal plane. As you can see, this pubic symphysis and this anterior superior spine, they lie in the same coronal plane. Now, the ilium bone has two spines, right? There's an anterior superior iliac spine and then there's a posterior superior iliac spine. The anterior superior iliac spine and the posterior superior iliac spine connect the wing of the ala of the ilium, and this forms the iliac crest. So as you can see, this is the iliac crest. This is the anterior superior iliac spine. This is the posterior superior iliac spine, and both of them form the iliac crest. This is the anterior two-third curvature, and this is the posterior one-third curvature. Now, the anterior two-third curvature and the posterior one-third curvature together form a lot of origins and insertions that we will do on the next slides. So there's another spine now. This is the anterior superior iliac spine, and this is the anterior inferior iliac spine. The anterior superior iliac spine curved down. This is the anterior border also of the ilium. So it curves down to form the anterior inferior iliac spine. Okay, so this is the anterior border of the ilium. This is the posterior border of the ilium, which starts from the posterior superior iliac spine all the way to the start of the greater sciatic notch. This is the posterior border of the ilium. And we have a medial border which demarcates the sacropelvic surface from the smooth iliac fossa. So this is the medial border of the ilium. These are the three borders of the ilium. Moving on, you can appreciate that this is on the posterior. So this is the left side of the bone. On the posterior side of the left side of the bone, we have a greater sciatic notch and a lesser sciatic notch. The greater sciatic notch and the lesser sciatic notch are separated by an ischial spine. This is the ischial spine because now, as you can see, this is the ischial bone, right? This is the ischium. This is the pubic. So this part is the ischial spine. Above the ischial spine is the greater sciatic notch, and below the ischial spine is the lesser sciatic notch. And this tuberosity here, which has these three feather-like markings, this tuberosity is called the ischial tuberosity. The ischial tuberosity participates in the origin of the hamstrings muscles, namely the semimembranosus, semitendinosus, biceps femoris, and also a little part of the adductor magnus. Moving on, we have the first muscle that we're going to study. That's the multifidus muscle. The multifidus muscle lies deeply to the erector spinalis muscles when we were studying the muscles of the back. So when we studied the erector spinalis muscles, we studied I love spine. The most lateral was the iliocostalis, then it was longissimus, and then it was spinalis. Deep to these three muscles is the multifidus muscle. The multifidus muscle originates from the posterior superior iliac spine. Okay, so you can imagine that there's a multifidus muscle that is originating from this area, the posterior superior iliac spine. Moving on, here you can see that the two symphysial surfaces come together to make the pubic symphysis joint. The two hip bones, this bone and an identical bone here, would come together to form a pubic symphysis joint, which is directed backwards and upwards. Now, how is it directed backwards and upwards? If you put the hip bone in a specific position, you can see that this area, when I look at the pelvic cavity inside made by these two hip bones, I know that this area is projected backwards and upwards. Moving on, and you know that when I'm talking about the pubis, this area is the symphysial surface. This area is the pelvic surface because it's articulating in the pelvic cavity, and this is the anterior surface. Now we have the ilium, as I told you. The ilium has a wing and then it has a body. This wing is also called as the ala of the ilium. Now, there's this important line on the pelvic cavity that we follow through. Now, first, there's an arcuate line that curves through the inner ilium, like a secret path, right? So it curves through the inner ilium in the iliac fossa, right at the medial border of the sacropelvic surface and the iliac fossa. There is the medial border of the ilium, right? So just a little below that, where it continues till the iliopubic eminence. This is the iliopubic eminence, right? Near the anterior inferior iliac spine, below the anterior inferior iliac spine. So we curve this arcuate line, and then this arcuate line reaches the iliopubic eminence, and then it continues as the pectineal line till the pubic tubercle. And since it's called the pectineal line, this red area is the origin of the pectineus muscle, which is why it's also called the pectineal line. Now, the arcuate line is very important because it demarcates the pelvic cavity from the true pelvis to the false pelvis. It's very important to the gynecologist because the baby's head during vaginal birth passes from the true pelvic cavity. So to understand if the woman can have a C-section or she can participate in natural birth, we need to see if the baby's head will be able to pass through the true pelvic cavity. And that is important because the arcuate line demarcates the exact area of the false pelvis to the true pelvis. Now we have the ilium. The ilium has an iliac crest which starts from the anterior superior iliac spine to the posterior superior iliac spine. As you can see here, now the ilium has anterior border which started from the anterior superior iliac spine all the way to the start of the acetabulum, right? And then there was an important muscle that is attaching to the anterior inferior iliac spine. So this was the anterior superior iliac spine and this is the anterior inferior iliac spine. And what was attaching here? The straight head of rectus femoris. The rectus femoris is the most anterior muscle of the anterior thigh, and it is the most superficial muscle. You need to be able to remove the rectus femoris to go under the muscles that are the vastus lateralis, intermedialis, and vastus medius. So to reach the vastus muscles, you need to remove the rectus femoris from a gross model of the thigh. So the rectus femoris originates from the anterior inferior iliac spine, the straight head, and then there's a reflected head which originates from the supraacetabular groove located just above the acetabulum of the hip bone. So this is where the two heads of the rectus femoris will take its origin from. And it will go and insert in the tibial tuberosity. That's your rectus femoris. Moving on to the sartorius. The sartorius is a very beautiful muscle because it curves all the way from the anterior superior iliac spine to the medial epicondyle of the tibia. So it crosses the thigh obliquely from the anterior superior iliac spine all the way to the medial epicondyle of the tibia. That's your sartorius. Then we have the medial border. We said that the medial border demarcates the sacropelvic surface from the smooth iliac surface, extends from the iliac crest, which we said was where the two lips of the iliac crest were joining, as you can see here. So it stems from the iliac crest all the way to the iliopubic eminence. Now we said what was the iliopubic eminence? It was something that was joining the arcuate line. There was an arcuate line, and then there was an iliopubic eminence, and then there was the pectineal line. This is just a continuation of one line. Medial border, arcuate line, iliopubic eminence, and pectineal line. So if I just place my hand here, this is my medial border. Okay. Moving on, the posterior border was extending from the posterior superior iliac spine all the way to the start of the great ischiatic foramen or to the upper end of the posterior border of ischium. You can say either. Even if you say that it starts at the end of the, it ends at the start of the great ischiatic notch, you won't be wrong because that's exactly where the ischium also starts. Now we have two ligaments. Okay, now we have the great ischiatic notch and we have the lesser sciatic notch. Now there's a special kind of ligament called the sacrospinous ligament. It's called sacrospinous because it starts from the sacrum, which was articulating with the sacropelvic surface of the ilium. Now, some ligaments will start from the sacrum and come and insert on the ischial spine. Okay, so if I put a muscle, if I put a ligament like this, what will it do? It will convert this greater sciatic notch to a foramen. So the greater sciatic notch is converted into a foramen by the sacroiliac ligament. And that same sacroiliac ligament forms the superior boundary of the foramen of the lesser sciatic notch. So this is the ischial spine. This is the greater sciatic notch converted by a foramen, converted to a foramen by the sacrospinous ligament, which also forms the superior boundary of this lesser sciatic notch or the lesser sciatic foramen. So that same sacrospinous ligament that was converting the greater sciatic notch into the greater sciatic foramen is forming the superior boundary of the lesser sciatic foramen. And we have another ligament that comes from the sacrum all the way to this ischial tuberosity. This was the ischium, right? So this is the ischial tuberosity. Another ligament is coming from the sacrum to the ischial tuberosity, and that is making the inferior boundary of the lesser sciatic notch to a foramen. So the sacrotuberous ligament connects the sacrum and ischial tuberosity with a portion attaching to the posterior superior iliac spine. This is the posterior superior iliac spine converting the greater sciatic notch into a foramen. This is very important. Okay, guys. Moving on, we had the gluteal or posterolateral surface. Now, on the gluteal or posterolateral surface, we have three ridges or three lines. Okay, this is the iliac fossa, as you can see. This was the sacropelvic surface. The sacropelvic surface has an iliac tuberosity on the upper area. It had this lower roughened auricular surface, and it has this triangular area here called the pelvic surface. Okay, it's very important to be able to mark these. And then you had the two lips of the iliac crest, an outer lip and an inner lip. Okay, I told you that we divide the ilium into anterior two-thirds curvature and posterior one-third curvature, right? It runs from the anterior superior iliac spine to the posterior iliac spine. And at the level, there's the highest point of iliac crest is situated a little behind the midpoint. So the midpoint is somehow this, right? This is the midpoint, but you go a little behind it, and there's the highest point of the iliac crest. So the iliac, the highest point of your bone connecting this is called the crest. Now the two crests of two bones connected will give you an imaginary plane called the intercristal line. An imaginary transverse plane at this level is called the intercristal plane. And this intercristal plane passes at the level of L4 vertebra. It is very important for lumbar puncture. There's another thing called the iliac tubercle. Just 2 centimeters behind this highest point is the iliac tubercle. This is the iliac tubercle. Can you see this? So the two tubercles joined together imaginary line, they are called the transtubercle line, and they represent the L5 level. As you can see, this is a little higher than this is the crest. It's just one lumbar vertebra higher than the iliac tubercle. So the two crests join to give you the intercristal plane at the level of L4, and the two iliac tubercles join to give you a transtubercle plane at the level of L5. It's important for anesthesiologists to give you the L4, L4, L5 lumbar puncture injection before some special operations. Okay. Now, there's an important angle that is formed by the posterior superior iliac spine and the anterior superior iliac spine. Anatomists use this to look at any abnormalities of the bone. Now, as you can see here, this is the anterior superior iliac spine, this is the posterior superior iliac spine, all the way, this is the greater sciatic notch, this is the lesser sciatic notch, and this is the ischial spine, this is the hip joint complex, and this is the posterior pubic tubercle. Okay, now let's look at the iliac crest a little bit in detail. You know that this is the posterior one-third of the crest, and this is the anterior two-thirds of the crest. It starts from the anterior superior iliac spine all the way to the posterior superior iliac spine. Okay, so the tubercle of the iliac crest is closer to the anterior superior iliac spine than the posterior superior iliac spine. And then you have the outer lip of the iliac crest, the inner lip of the iliac crest. The ventral segment is a little concave, as you can see, and then the dorsal segment is a little convex outside, right? So the dorsal segment or the posterior segment is the outer sloping, and the anterior segment is inward sloping, right? Now we have some important muscles attaching to the iliac crest. Now remember, only one muscle on the iliac crest is inserting, which is why it's blue, and this is the external oblique. So the external, you had about 3 to 4 muscles that we were doing in the abdominal region. The abdominal region, when we talk about the six pack, we talk about the external oblique, we talk about the internal oblique, and the transversus abdominis. Abdominis, and two nerves were going here from the lumbosacral plexus, which were coming from the L1 root, that was the iliohypogastric, and the ilioinguinal nerve. They were passing in between the layers of these muscles. All these three muscles also, they have another muscle next to it, and that's the rectus abdominis. The rectus femoris is different from the rectus abdominis. The rectus abdominis is a vertical fibrous straight line that help to form the six pack of people who are gymming a lot and are very lean. So first muscle we'll talk about is the external oblique, which comes off from the, it inserts, sorry, it doesn't come off, it inserts on the outer lip of the iliac crest, anterior two-third, this blue line. Moving on, we have the internal oblique, which is this red line, and this internal oblique originates from intermediate area of anterior two-third of iliac crest, and then this third red line is the transversus abdominis, which originates from the inner lip of the anterior two-thirds of the iliac crest. This one, right next to it in the iliac fossa, is the iliacus muscle. Don't confuse it. So this is the external oblique, this is the internal oblique, and this is the transversus abdominis. Moving on, this is how they've showed you. This is the external oblique. If I cut it off, I get internal oblique. If I also dissect it, I get transversus abdominis. The straight fibers coming here are forming a conjoined tendon of rectus abdominis at the pubic tubercle. You will see it later. Now, we also have another muscle called the tensor fascia lata. At the other end, at the same end, sorry, at the same end, we find the tensor fascia lata near the external oblique, the internal oblique, and transversus abdominis. Here you can see this is the tensor fascia lata, okay, near the origin of the transversus abdominis here. This is the insertion of the tensor fascia lata. If you remember, the tensor fascia lata was a special kind of muscle that was taking fibers from the gluteus maximus. Both these fibers were converging and forming an iliotibial tract, which was going and inserting into the lateral epicondyle of the femur, and it was also giving you a special kind of condition called the runner's knee. So, in the very athletic people who run a lot, they get an iliotibial syndrome in which this iliotibial tract basically becomes very inflamed. Okay. Now moving on, we have the latissimus dorsi. I told you the latissimus dorsi is overused or overinflamed in injuries like swimming a lot or climbing a lot. That's when the latissimus dorsi is its movement is at its peak. So the latissimus dorsi also originates from the posterior one third of lateral slope of iliac crest. So come to the posterior one third. This is the posterior one third, right? So in the front we did the external oblique, the internal oblique, and the rectus abdominis and the tensor fascia lata. Now we're coming on the posterior one third of the lateral slope, and we're talking about the latissimus dorsi now. Okay, so the latissimus dorsi comes off from the posterior one third of the lateral slope. So this is your latissimus dorsi. Okay, can you see this? It has a very wide origin, as you can see on this image. It comes from the thoracic T7 vertebra to L5 all the way, and then goes and inserts in the bicipital groove in the lady between two majors. In the bicipital groove, you had the lady between two majors, the latissimus dorsi, and then on the medial and lateral lips, you had the pectoralis major and the teres major, respectively. Now you have the quadratus lumborum. This also originates from the posterior one third of the iliac crest inner surface. So here they have not shown you quadratus lumborum, but here you can imagine that the quadratus lumborum is also on the posterior one third of the iliac crest's inner surface. If they have tried to show this as quadratus lumboris, this should be a little more laterally on the inner lip. Okay, that's your quadratus lumborum. Now we have another insertion of the erector spinae. The erector spinae was the iliocostalis, the longissimus, and the spinalis muscles of the back. And they originate from the medial slope of the posterior one third of the iliac crest. So it's somewhere here. Okay, but it's not shown on this, this bone. That's your rectus spinalis. Now I can show you that the iliac tubercle here is located approximately 5 centimeter posterior to the anterior superior iliac spine. If I find the anterior superior iliac spine, I go 5 centimeter posterior and I find the iliac tubercle. Here, the two tubercles make a transverse plane, and that is forming the transtubercle plane at the level of L5. Now, we have a few borders. I already discussed the anterior border of the ilium that was running from the anterior spherical spine to the acetabulum. And we should see a little muscle, some revision of a little muscles here. On the iliac crest, we had the abdominal muscles, the external oblique, internal oblique, and rectus abdominis. And then the anterior superior spine had a special muscle called near the anterior superior spine, we had the tensor fascia lata. Here they're given you sartorius also. Anterior inferior iliac spine had the rectus femoris. We had two heads of the rectus femoris. The straight head was coming from the anterior inferior iliac spine. The reflected heads were coming from the superior groove of the obturator foramen. Superior groove of the, sorry, acetabulum. Okay, so that's your rectus femoris, and then you have the pubic symphysis that was making the pubic symphysis joint with the other hip bone, and then we had the ischial tuberosity where you had all the hamstrings. I told you the hamstrings are made from the semimembranosus, semitendinosus, and biceps femoris. Moving on, the posterior border was starting from the posterior superior iliac spine to the end of posterior border of ischium, or I said you can just say that it's the start of the greater sciatic notch. Now the medial border, a revision here, the medial border was continuing into the iliac, iliopubic eminence, which was continuing to the iliopubic eminence was continuing as the pectineal line into the pubic tubercle. And then the surfaces of the ilium included the gluteal surface and the iliac fossa. Now we have three important lines to understand on the gluteal surface, the three muscles, gluteus maximus, gluteus minimus, and gluteus medius. Now there's a posterior gluteal line which starts from it's the shortest line, by the way. Can you see this line separating these two red originations? This is the posterior gluteal line. It is the shortest line of the three gluteal lines, okay? So this is the shortest line. It starts 5 centimeter in front of the posterior superior iliac spine. This is your posterior superior iliac spine. It starts just 5 centimeters in front of it, goes down to end at the upper part of the greater sciatic notch. So this is your posterior gluteal line. Moving on, you have a really long line, which is our next line, and that is our anterior gluteal line. It starts all the way, it's the longest line, this line that is separating these two originations. It starts from 4 centimeters behind the anterior superior iliac spine, runs backwards and downwards, and ends at the middle of upper border of the greater sciatic notch. This is your anterior gluteal line. Now you have these two are very well demarcated, right? Now there's an irregular line called the inferior gluteal line. It's a little irregular and ill-defined. It's also weirdly seen on this. So basically, you know that this is the anterior superior iliac spine and this is the anterior inferior iliac spine. So the inferior gluteal line begins a little behind and above the anterior superior iliac spine. So it starts from here, it runs backwards and downwards to end at the apex of the greater sciatic notch. The apex means the highest point of this greater sciatic notch. So this is the inferior gluteal line. Now, why are these three lines important? Because we have three muscles, the gluteus maximus, the gluteus medius, and the gluteus minimus. We said that we had two special nerves coming on from the sacral plexus, the superior gluteal nerve and the inferior gluteal nerve. The superior gluteal nerve was actually passing between the gluteus medius and minimus, supplying these two medius and minimus all the way to the tensor fascia lata. So the superior gluteal nerve was supplying the gluteus medius, the gluteus minimus, and the tensor fascia lata, and the inferior gluteal nerve was supplying the gluteus maximus muscle. Remember that. Now the gluteus maximus muscle comes off from behind the posterior gluteal line. So this is the gluteus maximus. The gluteus medius muscle is the biggest origination and it comes between these two, originates between the posterior gluteal line and the anterior gluteal line, right? So this is the gluteus medius. And between the anterior gluteal line and the inferior gluteal line is the gluteus minimus, right? Moving on, this was the iliac fossa. It was a large concave area on the inner surface of the ilium and it was forming the lateral wall of the pelvis. The iliacus muscle originates from the upper two-thirds of this iliac fossa. This was the iliacus muscle. It was the upper two-thirds was originating from the iliac fossa, and then some of it was originating from the inner lip here. This is the inner lip of the iliac crest, and some of it was originating from the ala of sacrum and anterior sacroiliac ligaments. Okay. And then it was inserting into the lesser trochanter of the femur with the iliopsoas tendon shared with psoas major. So there was a special iliopsoas tendon what was inserting in the lesser trochanter of the femur, and that was the iliacus and psoas major combined to form the iliopsoas tendon. Now we've done the sacropelvic surface. The sacropelvic surface has the iliac tuberosity in the upper large roughened area. Below it was the sacroauricular surface. This auricular surface is so called because it looks like apparently an ear. It's articular but pitted. With the sacrum, it forms the sacroiliac joint. And then we had this little pelvic surface beneath it, which was triangular. It forms the lateral part of the pelvis along the upper border of the greater sciatic notch. So this is the greater sciatic notch here, right? So along the upper border of the greater sciatic notch, this surface is marked by preauricular sulcus. It's deeper in females than males. Okay, now we have some special ligaments. The first of which is a posterior sacroiliac ligament, which is attached to the iliac tuberosity. So here at the iliac tuberosity, we have the sacroiliac ligament attached. Deep to this ligament, we have the interosseous sacroiliac ligament attached. And then there's some special ligaments that come off the lumbar vertebrae and attach to the iliac tuberosity and transverse processes of L5 vertebrae. And this is called the iliolumbar ligament. Can you see the iliolumbar ligament here? So all these three ligaments attach to the iliac tuberosity. Now, there's a special ligament also that is called the inguinal ligament. The inguinal ligament passes from the anterior superior iliac spine all the way to the pubic tubercle. So it's like this. This is the inguinal ligament. It is very important because the this medial part of the inguinal ligament has a special ligament called the lacunar ligament. The lacunar ligament is the area where the femoral canal is formed. In the femoral canal, we have the femoral vein, artery, nerves, and lymphatics. So here is the lacunar ligament, and all the way from the pubic tubercle to the anterior spherical spine is the inguinal ligament. Okay. Now coming on to the pubis, I told you the pubis has a body and two ramises, right? This is the superior ramus, this is the inferior ramus, and it was forming the anterior one-fifth of the acetabulum. It had certain surfaces. It had an anterior surface, a posterior surface, which we call the pelvic surface, this one, and the symphysial surface because it was making the pubic symphysis joint. The pubic tubercle, as we said, attaches the inguinal ligament to the anterior superior iliac spine. Here we can see that there are three things that attach to the pubic tubercle. First of all is the inguinal ligament. The second is the lacunar ligament, in which was the femoral canal. This is basically an aponeurosis of the oblique externus, and it is also called the Gibbernauth's ligament. Now we have another tendon called the conjoint tendon that was attaching to the pubic tubercle also. The conjoint tendon is the same tendon that is attaching the rectus abdominis muscle. The aponeurosis of the internal oblique and transversus abdominis muscles converge to form the conjoint tendon, which attaches to the superior border of this pubic tubercle. Now we have the body of the pubis. This body of the pubis, the anterior surface of the body of the pubis has these two attachments here. They should be a little linear, but they're dotted in this diagram that I'm holding, this model that I'm holding, even though these two should be a little linear. These two, the upper one is the pubic tubercle, which attaches the adductor longus. The adductor longus comes off from here. Okay. And then the next one, a little below it, is the adductor brevis. Brevis in Latin means short, right? So the shorter muscle originates beneath the adductor magnus muscle. And then we have the obturator externus. The obturator externus, this is the obturator externus. And this is also coming from adjoining inferior ramus. This is the inferior ramus, and this is the obturator externus coming off, right? So look at this obturator externus, which is coming off from here and going and inserting into the intratrochanteric fossa of the femur. Okay. Now, after doing the obturator externus, the adductor brevis and adductor longus, from the body of the pubis, we move on to some special levator ani muscles. These levator ani muscles are special muscles in the pelvic cavity that are very important to gynecologists. Okay, now there are two most important levator ani muscles, the puborectalis and the pubococcygeneus. The puborectalis comes off from the two pubic bones, the pubic body bones, and they sort of form a sling for the rectum to pass through. Weakening of this may cause um, issues with defecation and also urinary frequency, because this levator ani muscle, puborectalis, and this pubococcygeal muscle coming on from the coccyx to the pubic bone form these circular fibers, right? When they weaken, there are issues with urinary frequency and defecation. Now, those people are told to do Kegel exercises to improve the movement of these two muscles. So we have the puborectalis that comes off and forms a sling, and then we have the pubococcygeal muscles. Now, remember that the bladder is literally put on top of the pubococcygeal and this in front of the puborectalis muscle. So when women are pregnant, they go to the washroom like a million times a day because the uterus is pressing down on the bladder, which is pressing down on these muscles, and it is very difficult to hold the pee in. And then we have a muscle called the obturator internus. As you can see here, it comes off from the obturator membrane, all the way from the obturator membrane, and goes and inserts into the lesser trochanter. Along with the obturator internus, the superior gamellus and inferior gamellus also insert into the lesser trochanter as we did in the femur yesterday. So this is the pubic symphysis joint. These are the two symphysial surface that are coming close and forming the pubic symphysis joint. Now, I told you that there was a rectus abdominis muscle that was coming all the way straight and forming a conjoint tendon and inserting into the pubic symphysis. We have a special muscle called the pyramidalis, the lateral part of the pubic crest. So this was the pubic tubercle, right? And this was the pubic crest. So the lateral part of the pubic crest gives origin to the pyramidalis muscle. A very small muscle, not shown here, not drawn here, is the pyramidalis. And the lateral part of pubic crest gives origin to this. Adductor longus, again, it comes off from the pubic tubercle, pubic crest, and body of pubis all the way to the posterior aspect of the middle third of shaft of femur into linea aspera. We did the adductor longus insertion when we did the linea aspera on the femur, right? Okay, moving on, the superior ramus of pubis. So this is the superior ramus of pubis. In Latin, it means branch. It's a bony bar that extends from the body of the pubis to this acetabulum. It has three borders: the superior border, the inferior border, and the this anterior border. So this is the superior border, this is the anterior border, and this is the inferior border. That these are the three borders, and it gives us three surfaces: the pectineal surface. This is the pectineal surface on which is the pectineal line. The pelvic surface behind is the pelvic surface, or posterior to the pubic tubercle or pectineal lines is the pelvic surface, which is articulating with the pelvic cavity inside. And this is the obturator surface. Why this is the obturator surface? Because the obturator externus and internus are coming off from these areas. Then we have the superior ramus of the of pubis, which had a pectineal line. The pectineus muscle was being given origination from here. This will form the pubic arch. The two bones will come together and form the pubic arch here. In purple here, you can see the pectineal line of pubis. It was a continuation of the arcuate line. Now, this was the arcuate line that was continuing into the pectineal line, and the pectineal line was giving an origin to the pectineus muscle. Now, this is the superior ramus of the pubis, and this is the inferior border. This is sharp and it forms the upper margin of the obturator foramen. Now, the superior ramus of pubis also has an obturator crest and an obturator groove. So, if you can see here, there's an obturator crest here and there's an obturator groove here. Okay, and this anterior border is also called this anterior border is rounded. It extends from the pubic tubercle all the way to the acetabular notch, and it has an obturator crest and an obturator groove here. The pectineal surface. So this is the pectineal surface on which this red line can be seen. It's a triangular area, as you can see, between the anterior border here and the superior border here. It extends from the pubic tubercle all the way to the iliopubic eminence. This was the iliopubic eminence, along which was the arcuate line leading to the medial border of the ilium. Then we have the pelvic surface, which was a smooth inner surface between the superior border and the inferior border, continuous with the pelvic surface of the body of pubis. Then we have the obturator surface. This obturator surface, it lies between the anterior, this anti-rounded border, and the inferior sharp border. It presents obturator groove. This groove is important for passage of obturator nerve and vessels. I told you the word obturator means close in Latin, and basically it closes the leg. It brings the leg or thigh back to the midline reference point. So it is the obturator nerve gives innervation to the adductors, the adductor magnus, the adductor brevis. Okay, so the adductors bring your leg back to the reference point, and that's why the obturator nerve is so called obturator nerve. The gracilis is an important muscle. It originates from the anterior surface of the body of the pubis and the inferior pubic ramus. So this is the gracilis. It originates from the anterior surface of the body of the pubis and the inferior pubic ramus. Specifically, it originates from a line extending from the inferior margin of this if this pubic symphysis along the inferior ramus of the pubis and onto the adjacent ramus of the ischium. So this is the gracilis originating from here. Moving on, we have the pubofemoral ligament. This ligament helps to stabilize the hip joint and attaches to the superior ramus of the pubis to the lower part of the intertrochanteric line. Now, the inferior ramus of pubis. It is inferiorly located. It's a flat bony bar. Okay, so this was the adductor longus, the adductor brevis, and this was the gracilis in origin. Right? Now, this inferior ramus of pubis also attaches to the ramus of the ischium because this is the ischium, right? So it basically makes the boundary of the pelvic outlet. It has a muscle attachment also, and it supports some pelvic structures. Moving on, we have the ischium. The ischium has a body and it has a ramus. The ischium is the posterior inferior part of the hip bone. This is the ischium bone. It forms 2/5 of the acetabulum. Here you can see it is forming 2/5 of the acetabulum. It forms the posterior boundary of obturator foramen. This is the obturator foramen. So if I put it like this ischium is forming the posterior boundary of the obturator foramen. It has two parts. It has a body and it has a ramus. Okay. Now, the body of ischium is thick and massive mass of bone. It lies behind and below the acetabulum. It has two ends. It has an upper end that forms the posterior 2/5 of the acetabulum. This area, this is the upper end. It has a lower end, which is the ischial tuberosity. This is the ischial tuberosity. It gives off the ramus of the ischium, which forms an acute angle with the body, and it adds on to the ramus of the pubis. Okay. Moving on, it has a anterior border and posterior border. When we talk about the anterior border, it forms the posterior margin of the obturator foramen. This one, this is the anterior border of the ischium bone, and then a posterior border which is continuous above with the posterior border of the ilium. So this is the posterior border of the ilium, right? This was the posterior superior spine posterior border. So this posterior border is continuous with the posterior border of the ischium bone, right? And below it, it ends at the upper end of ischial tuberosity. This is the ischial tuberosity. This can you see these three muscle feathers here? This is the ischial tuberosity. On this image, you can see this ischial tuberosity in the yellow area. It forms the lower part of the great ischiatic notch. Below the notch, posterior border projection is called the ischial spine. This is the ischial spine. The ischial spine is literally the mid-level of the greater sciatic notch and the lesser sciatic notch. The ischial spine divides it into the greater sciatic notch and the lesser sciatic notch. Below the spine, posterior border called a concavity called this the lesser sciatic notch. Now here you can see the greater sciatic notch, the ischial spine, and the lesser sciatic notch. This is the ischial spine. This hip bone has been tilted to demonstrate this ischial spine. So this is the greater sciatic notch and this is the lateral sciatic notch. And there's a lateral border also which forms the lateral margin of the ischial tuberosity. So this is your ischial tuberosity and this is the lateral border, the one that is forming the lateral area of the ischial tuberosity. Moving on, what is important to know here that the femoral, okay, we have three surfaces. We have the femoral surface, pelvic surface, and dorsal surface. So basically, this is the ischium, right? So we have a pelvic surface. This inner area is the pelvic surface. And then there's a dorsal surface and a femoral surface. So this is the femoral area and this is the dorsal surface, right? So the femoral surface is very important. Why? Because the femoral surface gives attachment to some muscles. The femoral surface is located on the anterior aspect of ischial tuberosity. This is the ischial tuberosity, and the anterior aspect, this area is the femoral surface, right? It is continuous with the external surface of ischial ramus. This is the ischial ramus. This continues as the femoral surface here externally. The function is the origin of quadratus femoris and obturator internus. So obturator internus and quadratus femoris comes off from here. This is the quadratus femoris, okay? And this is your obturator internus, okay? Moving on, the dorsal surface is located on back of ischium. So this is the ischium, right? And the dorsal surface is located at the back of ischium. Now the ischial tuberosity. This is the ischial tuberosity. If I take this ischial tuberosity and divide it into two parts, can you see this diagram here? I divide it into two parts. This is the upper part and this is the lower triangular part. So this is the ischial tuberosity. I divide it into two parts. This is the upper part and this is the lower part. The upper part has a superior lateral part and an inferior medial part because I take a line and diagonally draw it on the ischial tuberosity. So this is the superior lateral part, upper and lateral, and this is the inferior medial part. So this is my ischial tuberosity. I take it and divide it into two parts. This is the lower triangular part and the upper part has a superior lateral part and an inferior medial part. This is the superior lateral, this is the inferior medial. Okay. Now the smooth quadrilateral area subdivided by an oblique ridge into two parts like this. The superior lateral part gives origin to semimembranosus muscle, and the inferior medial part gives origin to semitendinosus and long head of biceps femoris muscles. So we have three muscles of the hamstrings: the semimembranosus, the semitendinosus, and long heads of biceps femoris. All of them are coming off from the ischial tuberosity. The lower triangular area, this lower triangular area, the one that was left on the previous image I showed you, has a rough lower triangular area. It is subdivided by a longitudinal ridge. I will divide it into two parts by a longitudinal ridge like this. Can you see this image? This is the lower triangular area which is divided into a longitudinal ridge divided into two parts. The outer area is the origin of the adductor magnus, and the inner area is for the sacrotuberous ligament. Okay. Conjoined is the ischiopubic ramus. This is the ischiopubic ramus, which is joined with the pubic ramus. It forms the pubic arch with the corresponding ramus of the opposite bone. And it forms the it forms the margin of the obturator foramen also. Right? Now, attachments to the ischium, I told you that the semimembranosus was coming off from the superior lateral part of the ischial tuberosity. The semitendinosus was coming off from the inferior medial part of the ischial tuberosity. And the long head of biceps femoris was coming off from the inferior medial part of the ischial tuberosity. Here you can see the semimembranosus, the semitendinosus, and biceps femoris. And this is the superior lateral part, the inferior medial part, and the two lower parts that were divided by a longitudinal ridge. This medial part was giving origination from this through the sacrotuberous ligament. Now the adductor magnus. The adductor magnus had an hamstrings part and an adductor part. The adductor part was originating from the outer surface of the ischiopubic ramus. So this is the ischiopubic ramus. The outer surface here, I think they've made it here. This is the adductor magnus hamstrings part. I think this is what they've tried to show here. I think so. I'm not sure. But the adductor magnus comes off from the lateral slope of lower triangular. No, the adductor part of the adductor magnus. So there are two parts of the adductor magnus, right? A hamstrings part and an adductor part. The adductor part comes from the outer surface of the ischiopubic ramus. This is the ischiopubic ramus. Um, I have no idea where it's coming off from, but it's coming off from somewhere here in the ischiopubic ramus. And the hamstring part originates from lateral slope of triangular portion of ischial tuberosity. So this is what the ischial tuberosity, and this is where the hamstring part of the adductor magnus was coming off from. Both of them joined to insert into the linea aspera and the adductor tubercle. We did an adductor tubercle on the femur. It was near the medial epicondyle of the femur, and that's where the adductor magnus inserts itself in. Now, I told you that the obturator internus were combining with the superior gemellus above and the inferior gemellus below to go and insert into the lesser trochanter. Where are they coming off from? The superior gemellus originate from the posterior gluteal surface of the ischial spine. So the ischial spine has these two dots, right? These two dots are for the gemellus. The superior gemellus is coming off from the posterior gluteal surface of the ischial spine, and the inferior gemellus is coming off from the lateral aspect of the ischial tuberosity below the ischial spine. So these two muscles are the gemellus that are coming with the obturator internus to insert themselves into the lesser trochanter. Now we have three important ligamentous attachments. The sacrospinous ligament, which was coming off from the sacrum and attaching to the ischial spine. And then we had the sacrotuberous ligament, which was coming off from the sacral and attaching to the ischial tuberosity, also connecting the sacrum to the ischium. The ischiofemoral ligament is part of the hip joint capsule. It attaches from the lateral border of the ischial tuberosity. These are some images for revision, and that's it.